Stand Tall. Chapter 1. Edward is home this week. Miss Pierce, the school administrator assistant, asked him this. His brain blistered. Your parents didn't fill out the multiple residence sheet that we sent to them in the fall. We need to know where you are and when for emergencies. She handed him a form with multiple boxes for 2 home addresses, 2 business addresses, faxes, emails, cell phones, beepers. He handed her the month-log schedule his mother had given him, color coordinated for each week. Yellow for when he would be living with her. Blue for when he would be living with his father. Miss Pierce looked at the schedule. Will this be changing monthly? He shifted. Yes. You'll be getting a new schedule monthly? She had a too loud voice. He knocked. You'll need to bring that by the office on the 1st of the month. And we need to know who is the custodial parent, your mother or father. They're doing it together, even though they're divorced. He said this quietly. If your parents are custodians, then that's a different form. She handed him that form. Is there one parent who should be contacted with all school issues? He sighed. They kind of take turns. She handed him a form that if both parents want to contact on any issue, it makes it a little more difficult for us. If they both want to receive your report cards, we need to know that too. He didn't want anyone to receive his report cards. He wished there was a form for that. Miss Cosgrove, the school janitor, was fixing a squeaky door. He took out his little can of oil and squirted a few drops on the hinges, opened it and closed it. Instantly fixed. Miss Cosgrove could fix anything. Is there anything else? Miss Pierce shoved her reading glasses low on her nose. He wondered if oil worked on administrative assistants. Oh yes, she sniffed. Who will be receiving the invoice for school trips? She gazed up at him, way up. He bent his knees to seem shorter. I don't know, he said. That can be put on his form, Form C, which can you attach to Form D, which covers any emergency medical care you might require when you are off school property, but participating in school activities like athletics. And if both of your parents want to receive an audio cassette of the principal's
Pause it.
non non-emotional holidays address. They needed to put an X in that box. I think that's it. The newsletter comes out quarterly and can also be mailed to grandparents and other interested parties. My grandpa lives with my dad. That saves us on postage. I'll need those back on Friday. He looked at the forms on his hand. There it was, in black and white, just how complicated his life had become. He stood in front of the huge white oak tree in the middle of the Ripley Memorial Park. It was tall and thick, with serious bark, an oak with an attitude. He cocked his head, stretched his long arms out, imitating the tree, and froze. He'd seen a street performer do this in New York City. The man drew a big crowd. Every so often, the man would move slightly. People put money in his hat. Miss Clitter walked by with her granddaughter and stopped. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. They looked up at him for the longest time. He moved his right hand a little, then his left. The little girl giggled. Miss Clitter said, "Now, where'd you learn to do that?" He said nothing. Part of the act. Winked at the little girl, who grinned. He had an itch, but he didn't scratch it. Miss Clitter moved off, laughing. He lifted his leg slightly and wiggled it. "You say a big hello to that grandfather of yours," he shouted. Miss Clitter was in love with his grandfather. "You tell him I'm going to do everything I know to do to help him in his time of need." His grandfather currently in the Veterans Admiration Hospital in Blackmore had his right leg removed, just below the knee, 2 weeks ago. His grandfather usually hid when he saw Miss Clitter coming. This was harder to do with half a leg, but he was working on it. Half a leg, but he was working on it. The little girl waved goodbye and crossed the bridge with his grandmother. He straightened to full height, 6 feet, 3.5 inches. He was the tallest 7th grader boy in the history of Eleanor Roosevelt Middle School. The tallest 12-year-old boy anyone in Ripley had ever seen. Now you know why people call him Tree. It had been years since anyone called him by his real name, Sam. Jeremy Liggins had first called him Tree in 4th grade. Jeremy was one of those empire athletes who got to do whatever he wanted. He stood on the baseball diamond and renamed half the class, like Adam named the animals in the Bible. Jeremy's friend got the cool names: Fire, Boomerang. When it came to non-athlete nobodies, the names got harder: Tree, Mobile, Snot. He'd gotten used to the name. Considered the white oak, some of the roots protruded from the ground, fat roots that wounded around rocks. He had studied the root stems of trees, figured if he was going to be called one, he should at least know how they worked. He'd learned this from his grandfather, who could fix almost anything except trees' parents' marriage. You've got to take a thing apart to see what it's made of, Grandpa always said. So he learned how roots could go as deep in the ground as a tree's branches grow tall. How they suck up nutrients from the earth, like a boy slurps a milkshake through a straw. How the bark protects the tree's insides, like skin protects people. How being a tree is the best thing going in the planet world. People expect trees to be strong and steady and give good shade. Tallness is packed with great expectations. He picked up his duffel bag, remembered what he'd forgotten to pack. Now that he was leaving every other week at different houses, he always forgot to pack something. His warm gloves were at his mother's house. His good sneakers were too. He needed them for basketball practice. But it would take a lot more than sneakers to make him good at the game. He couldn't remember if he packed underwear. Probably not. His personal park squirrel, Nuts, came a foot away to greet him. Nuts had half an ear, so he was easy to spot. He was more nervous than other squirrels. Tree always wondered what happened to him. Dysfunctional childhood. Probably. Hey, Nuts. Tree took out a bag of almonds, tossed one to the squirrel. How's life in the park? Nuts shook a little, ate the food. You being treated okay? Because if anything has, you give me a call. He threw the squirrel another nut. A strong, cold wind wiped through the park. He'd been playing there. He'd been playing here, walking here for so many years. But since his parents got divorced, it felt like a different place. Upstairs to the north was where he'd go when he was staying at his mom's new house. Across the footbridge to the south was where his dad and grandfather still lived. So much he changed since the summer, including the white oak. Its fat green leaves had turned red in the fall, then shriveled up. The acorns had fallen off, picked up by squirrels, getting ready for winter. It was winter in his life, too. And not just because it was December. He started walking towards his grandfather's house, past along Salvation Army trumpeter playing Christmas carols. Fished in his pocket, found $1, put it in the red bucket. Miss Stench's dog, Fang, trotted toward him, barking, mean. Fang, be nice. Miss Stench yanked on the expanding leash, lurched forward. Fang ran up to the white oak, lifted his leg, and peed on the noble gray bark. Tree sighed deep. Cold air came out. Being a tree isn't easy. And that's the end of chapter 1.